Hi there, I'm Joe Tye. You know, every age likes to think of itself as the age of anxiety. In 1997, Dr. Robert Gerzon wrote a book called Finding Serenity in the Age of Anxiety. 1997! That was before 9/11, before the economic recession of 2008, before the pandemic and all of the aftershocks that we will be experiencing for a very long time to come. Now, everything in Gerzon's book is more appropriate and relevant and important today than when he wrote that book back in 1997. You know, when I decided to leave healthcare administration, strike out on my own, I read a book by Wilson Harrell, the late editor of Success magazine, and the book was called For Entrepreneurs Only. And I'll never forget, Harrell said, when you become an entrepreneur, when you start a business, for that matter, when you strike out to do anything that entails a risk, he said, you'll never again experience fear. Nope, fear is gone from your life forever. Why? You will have graduated to terror. And given that courage is one of the most important qualities for any leader, any entrepreneur to instill in their company, in their organization, you would think that the people would study it more seriously. Study courage, study perseverance, which, as we'll see later, are flip sides of the same coin. Winston Churchill said that courage is the most important of all virtues. C.S. Lewis, author of the Narnia Chronicles, took that one step further and he said, courage is all of the other virtues at the point where they're tested. When I was in business school, I did an MBA at Stanford and a master's in hospital administration at the University of Iowa. 4 years of graduate business education. I never once heard the word courage or perseverance in a classroom setting. Oh, we did lots of spreadsheets and we learned about EBITDA and things like that, but we never talked about courage. We never talked about how to create a courageous organization. And that's what this particular session is all about. Helping you cultivate a culture of courage and perseverance for this age of anxiety. You know, during the pandemic, I've been thinking a lot about what I consider to be the ultimate paradox in life. And that is this: whatever you most need at any time in your life will be hardest for you to find at precisely the time you need it the most. It's easy to be motivated when everything's going great. Job's going well, the kids are happy, you got money in the bank, you're about to go on vacation, you're motivated. But that's irrelevant because things are already going great. It's when your job is falling apart, the kids are in trouble, your health is struggling, bill collectors at the door. That's when it's hardest for you to be motivated. That is also when it's most important. As anybody who's ever lost a job and 2 years later said, best thing that ever could have happened, they had to find the motivation to get up and do something, even though what they really wanted to do was crawl in under the bed and pull the door in behind them. It's easy to have courage when your fears are small. It's easy to persevere your way over little speed bumps. It's when the fears have become monsters, when the speed bumps have grown into brick walls. That's when it's hardest for you to find the courage to face down the fears, to find that inner strength, to plow your way through the brick walls. But that is when it's most important. And that's why this session we're talking about now is so important. The time for you to invest in your own courage and your own determination, the time for you to invest in a courageous and a determined culture is now, before you hit the brick walls. I'm assuming here that you haven't already hit the brick walls. That paradox also applies to culture. Admiral Eric Olson wrote an article in the McKinsey Quarterly called The War on the Coronavirus. He said something really important. He said, you must not fail to invest in your culture because you're in a crisis. That's not a good excuse. He said, if you don't invest in your people, if you don't invest in your culture, it will go someplace you don't want it to go. And once it does, it is impossible for you to get it back. Again, that's why it is so important now for you to be thinking about how do you maintain your own courage and how do you sustain the courage of the people who look to you for leadership in the middle of a crisis like what we're going through today. In today's world, leadership obligation number one, I think of it as leadership CPR, courage, perseverance, and resilience, to which I add V, vision. Leadership, CPR plus V. That's the most important thing you can do for yourself, for your team, for the customers that you serve. It's never been more important than it is today. And I promise you it will be even more important tomorrow. So let's get started. Think about the place where you work, the building you work in. I'll bet you anything, before that building was constructed, you had a team of architects and designers. You may have had landscape architects working with you, interior designers. You probably had committees talking about room layout and what color is the carpet going to be. You may have gone out in the parking lot with masking tape and mapped out rooms to make sure everything would fit and move around okay. But when it comes to the things that really matter, the employee experience, the customer experience, those things are not determined by the visible architecture of bricks and mortar, are they? They are much more influenced by the invisible architecture of values and culture and attitude. And where's the blueprint for those things, the things that really matter? And we encourage organizations to actually create, and I mean literally create, a document that is your cultural blueprint. And we use a construction metaphor where the foundation is core values, the superstructure is corporate culture, organizational culture, and the interior finish is attitude in the workplace. And let's look at each of those a little more closely. The foundation of core values. You should have, every company should have, a statement of core values that defines who you are, what you stand for, and what you won't stand for. It should be unique. It should be authentic. I'm amazed at how many, we do a lot of work in healthcare. I'm amazed at how many hospitals just copy down something like I care, and you can almost guess what it means: integrity, compassion, accountability, respect, and excellence. Well, the problem with a generic boilerplate statement of values like that is, number one, that's a pretty low bar. Of course I expect integrity and compassion and excellence from you. I expect that from every hospital. How does that make you different and special? Number two, you do this acronym, I care, in hopes that people will learn it and know it, and they probably don't. And it doesn't differentiate you from anybody else. Having a statement of core values that is authentic and unique establishes who you are as a company. And let me give you two examples. Contrasting examples. In Iowa, where I live, there's a company called ClickStop. They started out selling truck parts online. Year after year after year, they are one of the fastest growing companies in Iowa, rated as the best place to work. They have 6 core values, one of which is expect greatness in yourself and inspire it in others. Another is make time for fun and family. Not one of their 6 values has to do with growing a business, making money. They're all about being better people, and yet the result is growing a business and making money. Now contrast ClickStop with a company called Cypress Semiconductor in the Silicon Valley, where the stereotype culture is, laid back, bring your puppy to work. Cypress Semiconductor, they call themselves the Marine Corps of Silicon Valley. Their CEO wrote a book called No Excuses Management. And one of their core values is, Cypress is about winning. We do not tolerate losing. Now, you could not ask for 2 different examples of an approach to creating a statement of core values, but in each case, they are unique, they're authentic, and they help to define who the company is, and they help the company never make hiring mistakes. I mean, who would go to work for a company that says, we're the Marine Corps of Silicon Valley, and instead of make time for fun and family, like ClickStop, we say things like, the best thing about Friday, only 2 more working days until Monday. It helps you clarify the kind of people you want and then what you expect from them. So here's a question for you. We're talking about courage and perseverance and resilience. Should those things be incorporated in a statement of core values? I mean, should that be fundamental to who you are? We help you be courageous. We expect you to be resilient, and we're going to be there for you to do those things. And if so, if it's not now, isn't this a good time to take that plaque off the wall and reconsider it? Should you have something about self-care? Make time for fun and family. Make time for yourself. Take care of yourself. Should that be a core value for your company? Now, on that foundation of core values, the superstructure is culture. Corporate culture, organizational culture. I define it very simply as the personality, the character of an organization. And sometimes you can feel it within minutes. The difference between Costco and Walmart, the difference between United Airlines and Southwest Airlines, McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. They're in the same businesses. What is different is the culture, and you can feel it pretty quickly. And there's an exercise that we encourage people to do. Define your culture in 6 words. Not a laundry list, not some advertising slogan, but how do you tell your story in just 6 words? Cypress Semiconductor does it. The Marine Corps of Silicon Valley. 6 words. They define what you can expect if you're an employee. They define what you can expect if you're competing. Southwest Airlines, they have 3 core values: warrior spirit, servant's heart, fun-loving attitude. If you give them the hyphen, that's 6 words. Warrior spirit, this is what you can expect if you're United, American, Delta, competing with us. Servant's heart, this is what we expect of you if you're our employee. Fun-loving attitude, this is what you're going to experience if you fly with us. In 6 words, they really tell the story of the company. Now, the company that really defined having a culture code was Netflix. And if you haven't seen their, I think it's a 180 slide deck on the Netflix culture code, which has spawned many others, you should look at it because it's very well done. But you could distill their philosophy down into 6 words. We hire only fully formed adults. And they talk about we're not a family, we're a team. If you're not the best performer, you're going to get a generous severance package. But it all comes down to you better be a fully formed adult if you're going to succeed in this company. Now, at Values Coach, we have 6 words that we think defines a culture of ownership. In a culture of ownership, people are emotionally positive, they're self-empowered, and they're fully engaged. Those 3 qualities help define what a culture of ownership looks like. And we distill it further into 3 words. In a culture of ownership, there is a mindset of proceed until apprehended. If something needs to be done, do it. Don't just complain about it. If you need help, ask for help. Don't just wait for somebody else to notice it and come along and help you. Now, back to our construction metaphor, where the foundation is core values, the superstructure is corporate culture, the interior finish is attitude in the workplace. And this is really where the rubber hits the road. And often what you'll see is a gap. If you build a building and there's a gap between the foundation and the walls, or the wallpaper is not hanging on the wall properly, there's been a gap in the construction. We see this in companies where one of their values maybe is integrity, but their culture tolerates 2 people talking about a coworker behind that person's back. Their culture tolerates bullying, and those things diminish your organization. Those things reduce the psychological safety you need to have in order to build a culture of courage and perseverance. So one of the things that you should do is you should define your behavioral expectations. What do you expect of people? And what are your ZTBs? We call them zero tolerance behaviors. Hopefully, physical violence would be one of them. But do you tolerate 2 people talking about a coworker behind that person's back, spreading rumors? Is that okay? Do you tolerate bullying? Do you tolerate incivility? And then take all of this work that you put into it and actually create a document. And I want to share with you, we've worked with Children's Hospital New Orleans for a long time. They have a statement of core values, it's 6 core values, but then they created a statement of cultural philosophy. And it outlines 8 essential qualities that they expect of people. And I want to share one with you. One of the things that they say is, we play so our children can play. And I'm going to read this to you. We believe in the healing power of laughter, play, and fun. We create an environment that encourages curiosity, playfulness, and joy to inspire hope, courage, and optimism for our patients, these children we take care of, and their families. We make a point of smiling at people in corridors. It's not optional. We make a point of it. We expect you to do it. We do our work with joy and enthusiasm. And we set an example of positive optimism for the children and the families we serve. Now, if you visit Children's Hospital New Orleans, you will experience one of the most positive healthcare cultures I've ever worked with. And it started with them being very clear about their values, their culture, and their behavioral expectations. So that's my challenge to you. Take a little bit of time away from the business, working in the business, and work on the business by creating a cultural blueprint for your values, your culture, and your attitude. In medicine, CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, is something that is done on a heart that is essentially dead, that is stopped. It's a last-ditch measure. When my friend and colleague Bob Dent and I wrote a book called The Heart of a Nurse Leader, which by the way applies to any leader, it never occurred to us that we might need to think about a sequel on CPR for the heart of a nurse leader. But now during the pandemic, we've seen so many people pushed to the edge of exhaustion. We've seen so many people frustrated and angry. We've seen so many people starting to drop out of their professions. Perhaps it's time for us to think about CPR for the heart of a leader in a new way. And by CPR, I mean courage, perseverance, resilience. Those are the three essential qualities you have to inspire in your culture and in your people to help them work their way through any crisis situation, like what many of us are going through today. Courage. Courage is the ability, the willingness to take a risk. Even if there's a chance of rejection, even if there's a chance of failure. By the way, let me say something about rejection and failure. Those are the things people are afraid of that we don't want to experience. But I'll tell you what, rejection is like the red badge of courage. Failure is like the Medal of Honor, because the only people who ever get rejected are the people who have the courage to ask. The only people who ever fail are the people who have the courage to try. You want to never be rejected? You want to never fail? Sit home on the couch and watch TV. Of course, then you fail at the most important test of all, which is the test of life. Amy Edmondson and others have talked about creating a psychologically safe environment. And that is step number one. If you want to have a culture where people have courage, you have to make it safe. You have to make it safe for people to express their opinions. You have to make it safe for people to stand up to a bully. You have to make it safe for people to raise their hand and say, time out, I think something's wrong here. P is perseverance. The ability to plow through whatever brick walls stand in the way. I'm really concerned reading about this so-called Great Resignation. So many people are leaving their professions. Now, some people are doing it because they can make more money or have a better job elsewhere, and more power to them. But so many people, especially in my field, which is healthcare, so many people are leaving because they're exhausted. And I want to pull them aside and remind them, why did you get into the healing professions in the first place? How can I help you have the perseverance to plow your way through this frustration? Because even though it's flickering right now, there is a light at the end of that tunnel. And that gets me to the R in CPR, which is resilience. And I don't just mean bouncing back. I mean bouncing back somehow stronger, wiser, with a better sense of character than when you fell down. In fact, I think resilience is probably the wrong word. The right word is not in the dictionary because I made it up. The right word to use here would be prosilience, prospective resilience, working on creating a culture where people expect they're going to fall down. We all do, it's inevitable. Knowing that when you do, you're going to have your team with you, they're going to help you get back up, and you're going to work your way through it. CPR is sort of, it's remedial. It's helping you deal with the challenges. What inspires people to want to have the courage and to persevere and to bounce back with resilience? That's the V and the H. V is vision. Proverbs, the book of Proverbs says, without vision, people perish. Pretty strong language. One of my favorite Bible verses, Mark 9:23, All things are possible for one who believes. But you have to have a vision. You have to have something to believe in. And this is the leader's role, is to create that inspiring vision that pulls people forward. At Values Coach, we talk about creating memories of the future. And I actually have a formula. I call it the 10A formula because it's 10 steps. Each one begins with the letter A. And since we don't have time to go through the whole 10 steps here, that is also homework that you will get as our guidebook on the 10A formula. But without hope, even no matter how powerful the vision is, it will just become a hope, a wish, a dream, a goal. Hope is the catalyst for belief. I love the way the late Wayne Dyer put it. He said, "You'll see it when you believe it." And, hope is the catalyst for belief. Hope is the most important job that a leader has in a time of crisis. Eric Hoffer, in his classic book, The True Believer, said, anyone who would change the world or a corner of the world must have the ability to spark and fan an extravagant hope. That was his word, extravagant hope. I'll give you my candidate for the dumbest thing that any CEO has said during the entire pandemic, and that's the CEO at Uber. He sent a message out to every employee saying, hope is not a strategy. Well, duh. Hope is not a strategy, but without hope, even the most brilliant strategy is doomed to failure. And in fact, I would say that in a time like this where there is so much disillusionment, so much anxiety, so much worry and concern, that maybe hope should be a strategy. Maybe that should be your most important strategy. How do we give people the hope that we can achieve our vision by having the courage and the perseverance and the resilience to move our way forward to it? And in the rest of this class, we're going to talk about some specific ways that you can do that. There are three terms that we use interchangeably, but they're very different emotions. And it's really important to understand what people are feeling so that you can diagnose it and treat it effectively. And those terms are anxiety, fear, and worry. We'll say, oh, I'm really anxious about this. Oh, I'm really afraid this. Oh, I'm worried about this. As if they're the same thing, but they're not. They're very different things. Anxiety is a generalized, non-specific sense of dread. It's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. You don't know what the other shoe is. You don't know when or where it's coming from. It's like the black cloud out there on the horizon, threatening but far away. And it is one of the most painful emotions. Why? Because you don't have any sense of control. You don't know where the other shoe is. It's like looking at the world through sunglasses that say doom. You can't see beautiful sunrises. You can't see rainbows if your inner self is so full of anxiety. And at a cognitive level, three bad things happen when you're full of anxiety. Bad thing number one, your memories get distorted. When you're in a state of high anxiety, all of your past failures and rejections seem really big and life-changing and certain to be repeated, and all of your past successes seem really insignificant. Your current perceptions get warped. When you're in a state of high anxiety, the threats out there seem a lot bigger and a lot more dangerous than they really are, and your own resources, your own assets, your own relationships seem not up to the task much more than they really are. And the third thing that happens is that your future vision gets distorted. When you're in a state of high anxiety, it is much easier for you to have a mental picture of you living under a bridge, warming your hands on a trash can fire, than to see that best thing that ever could have happened, expect a miracle sort of outcome. And what happens is if you give in to anxiety, you contribute to a self-fulfilling prophecy of things that you don't want to have happen. Norman Dixon wrote the classic book on the psychology of military incompetence. It's 400 pages long, but I can give you the executive summary in one sentence. The difference between competent and incompetent military commanders is that the incompetent military commanders do not do a good job of managing their anxiety. They give in to panic or they give in to paralysis, and they end up being defeated. Paul Tillich, in his book, The Courage to Be, wrote that anxiety is such a painful emotion because there's no sense of control that it works hard to try to become fear. Why? Fear is specific. You're afraid of something. Anxiety is the black cloud out on the horizon. Fear is the raging storm. You can hear it, you can feel it, you can touch it. And it gives you the illusion of control. If you're afraid of something, you know what you have to fight. And the problem is, if you're in a state of high anxiety, you will find things to be afraid of that are inappropriate. As Jim Collins put it in his book, How the Mighty Fall, when you're in a state of fear, you end up making bad decisions, taking inappropriate actions. You end up doing exactly the things that bring about that which you're afraid of. Worry is like anxiety in that it's about the future, but it's like fear in that it's specific. You're worried about something that might happen in the future. Now, as a leader, you have to recognize that anxiety and fear and worry, even though they're different things, they're related. They can paralyze you, they can paralyze your organization, or they can galvanize you to take the action you need to take. So what do you do as an entrepreneur? What do you do as a leader? You have to manage anxiety, and you do that by effectively communicating with people, by being in touch with people. Some of the things we're going to talk about later in this session on how to be an effective leader. You channel fear. You can't drive fear out of the workplace, Deming notwithstanding. When he said drive fear out of the workplace, he was speaking very specifically about not being afraid to stop the assembly line if you see a problem. But you can't drive fear out. It's a natural human condition. Make sure that people are afraid of the right thing. Make sure people are afraid of losing a customer, not afraid of losing their job, and they'll do the things to keep customers and then keep their job. And question worry. The great German poet Rilke, in his Letters to a Young Poet, wrote, train your doubt. When you have worry, when you have doubt, ask it questions. Make it answer. Why are you worried about this? Why do you think the sky is falling? When you question your doubt, when you train your doubt, when you question worries, you get specific answers, and it will help you move from right brain to left brain. And as we'll see shortly, that's what you have to do to manage anxiety and fear and worry. You may have heard the acronym FEAR, stands for Fantasized Evidence Appearing Real. FEAR can also be a fabulous excuse for avoiding responsibility. Oh, I didn't make that call. I was afraid they'd say no and I'd get rejected. Oh, I didn't try that. I was afraid that I might fail. And so many of the fears that we experience, that we allow to paralyze us, can be fantasized. Probably the most important sentence spoken during the entire 20th century. 1933, the darkest days of the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt came on the radio in his first inaugural address, and he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And it's really worthwhile to think about what he said next. He defined fear. He said, fear is nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into needed action. The Great Depression went on for another 7 years, but within the next 1 week, bank runs stopped. A sense of despair that prevailed over the country started to be replaced by hope. That one sentence, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We have to turn our paralysis into action. It changed the world. And so many of our fears are so totally irrational. I saw a bumper sticker once. I love this bumper sticker. It says, buckle up. It makes it harder for aliens to suck you out of the car. Now, that's an irrational fear. Never in the history of the world has a human being been sucked out of a car or a covered wagon by aliens. So, and we could laugh at that, but how many people never swim in the ocean because they saw the movie Jaws? You are more likely to be killed by hitting a deer on the highway or be stung by a bee out in a meadow than to be eaten by a shark in the ocean. And how many people miss out on that joy? How many salespeople never meet their quotas because they're afraid of rejection? If you ask for the sale and they say no, you're exactly where you were before. You have lost nothing and you have learned something. Ask somebody else. Ask in a different way. Make a different question. You've learned something. You're better off. Asking never makes you worse off. I'll never forget, I was speaking at a financial services group once, and it was my second trip there. I'd been there a year earlier. And afterward, this guy came up to me and he said, "You know, Joe, if the world was fair, right now I would be giving you a check for $10,000. I said, "Whoa, tell me more." And he said, "Wednesday's promise." And he showed me his wristband for Wednesday's promise, determination. And he said the words, "I will do the things I'm afraid to do, but which I know should be done. Sometimes this will mean asking for help to do that which I cannot do by myself." He said, "That's not just Wednesday's promise for me. That's 7 days a week promise." He said, "I've printed it out. It's on my locker at the gym. It's on the bathroom mirror. I have one on the seat of my car reminding me every time I get in the car, do the things I'm afraid to do. Ask for help when I need it." He said, "I can't believe it." He said, "Instead of saying, well, you know, it's been nice talking to you, I'm saying, sign here. Take the sale. I'm going after bigger customers than I ever did before because now I'm willing to ask for help." He said, "My income has gone way up. And if the world was fair, why, you'd get a commission." And then he went on to say, "You pointed out in your talk the world is not fair and how right you were. And you know, I wouldn't have taken a commission. But here's a guy who achieved something that was really important to him by standing up to fantasized evidence appearing real, the pain of rejection, doing what he had to do, taking action, and he changed his life in an important way." How many people sit home lonely because they don't have the courage to ask to be included or to ask for the date? How many people never start the business because they're afraid of failure, never write the book because they're afraid nobody will ever read it? And as the old saying goes, go to their graves with their songs still unsung in their heart. You have to confront that fear. And I want to give you a very simple, very powerful tactic for doing that. Give fear a name and it becomes just a problem. It is easier to solve problems than it is to conquer fear. If your fear, for example, is losing a job, what's the problem? It's very simple. The problem is you are not indispensable. If you knew you were indispensable, you would not worry about losing a job. And if you did, you know you'd find another one very quickly. Now, nobody is indispensable. But in any job, there are lots of things you can do to make yourself more valuable to your employer. Learn new skills. Do a better job of helping to promote the company. Wear the button when you're outside outside in the grocery store. You know, become a fan for your company. Those people tend to become more indispensable. And again, if they lose the job anyway, they're more likely to find a better job somewhere else or go out and start their own business. Sometimes you give fear a number. And again, it's easier to solve a problem. The problem is we don't have enough money. That's a very unspecific, fantasized evidence appearing real. Oh, we're going to run out of money. Make it specific. We only have this much money. We're spending this fast. We only have this much coming in. What can we do to reduce our expenses, increase our revenue? Here's what you're doing at a cognitive level. You're shifting fear from the right brain, the emotional side of the brain, to the left side, the logical, analytical side. Now, there are times when it's appropriate to be in the right side of your brain. You know, proposing marriage. You don't talk about the tax advantages. But when you're dealing with fear, you want to be analytical, you want to be logical, you want to think clearly. Fear will interfere with all of those things. So give fear a name, give fear a number, turn it into a problem, work on the problem, and you're much more likely to make the thing you fear not happen. Leadership authorities like Brené Brown, Simon Sinek, emphasize the importance of being vulnerable, being transparent, in your relationships with people, showing your emotions. And I think that is absolutely right on. It is totally appropriate to share your emotions with other people, especially in a time like today when we're going through so much with the pandemic and the economy and the uncertainty. There is one non-negotiable exception if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a leader, and that is you must not share your fear. Robert Louis Stevenson, the writer, said, "Keep your fears to yourself, share your courage with others," because he understood at an intuitive level that both fear and courage are contagious. And you as a leader don't want to give people, you don't want to infect people with fear, you want to infect them with courage. H. Jackson Brown, in his cute little book, Life's Little, more than cute, it was a really good book, Life's Little Instruction Book, he said, "Be brave. Even if you're not, pretend to be. Nobody else can tell the difference." You may have heard about the story of Shackleton, Sir Ernest Shackleton and the Endurance, the greatest survival story in history. Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, was trapped in the Antarctic ice for 2 full years. Imagine, if you want to imagine what it was like, lock yourself in your freezer with the lights out half the year for 2 years on minimal rations and then come out. And there's in the movie Shackleton, Sir Kenneth Branagh portrays Shackleton. And there's a scene where the ship's carpenter and Shackleton are not getting along. And finally the carpenter screams, "We're all going to die." Shackleton gets right in his face and he says, "Nobody's going to die." He understood that if any of his 26 men had any inkling that he didn't have hope and expectation and belief and faith that they were all going to survive, it could have started a downward spiral, emotionally circling the drain. He had to infect them with his courage. And nobody did die. And it was as much as the physical rigors that they went through, it was the emotional, the courage that that he sparked in his people. Here's another nautical example. You may have seen the movie U-571, a fictional story set in World War II. An American submarine is trying to capture a German submarine and everything goes wrong. The American sub blows up and sinks. The American skipper and most of the crew are killed. And you end up with a skeleton crew of Americans on this German submarine. They don't know how to operate. And the second in command on the old ship, played by Matthew McConaughey, the second in command is now the skipper. And they're around the periscope, and this young guy says, "What are we going to do now, skipper?" And the new skipper says, "I don't know. You think I have all the answers? Well, I don't. I don't know." And he goes back to the captain's quarters and he closes the door. And a couple of minutes later, there's a knock on the door. And he opens it up and there's Chief Clow, this old salt who's been in submarines since before young Skipper was in diapers. He says, "Permission to speak, sir." He said, "Yeah, Chief, what's on your mind?" And Chief says, "Those words you said back there, I don't know. Don't you ever say that to your men again. Those words will kill your men deader than a depth charge will. You're the skipper now, and the skipper always knows. Even when he doesn't know, the skipper always knows. You are the entrepreneur now. You are the leader now. People are looking to you for the kind of courage that Shackleton brought to his men in their Antarctic ordeal. You're the leader now. You're the entrepreneur now. You're the skipper now. And the skipper always knows. Even when he doesn't know, the skipper always knows. Now, before we start on this section, don't go look up the word Nedlog in your dictionary because it's not there. Not yet anyway. It should be. Someday it probably will be. But I made the word up. And I'll explain in a minute. George S. Patton, one of the most successful and aggressive military commanders of World War II, famously said, "Fatigue makes cowards of us all," something often quoted by another great leader, Vince Lombardi, the football coach. When people are exhausted, it's really hard to maintain their courage. And today, in the world of the pandemic, a lot of people are exhausted. I mean, there have been personal grief, there's been loneliness, there's been career and financial dislocation. A lot of people are just flat out exhausted. And your challenge as a leader, your challenge as an entrepreneur is to help people re-spark that spirit, to help people find the energy. And you know, in our Lone Ranger culture, it's really hard for people to ask. You know, we tend to give and give and give, and we pour and we pour and we pour, and eventually the pitcher's empty and you can't pour out of an empty pitcher. And we have to somehow find a way to relight that candle. And that's where the Ned Log rule comes in. You know the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The Ned Log rule is the golden rule in reverse. Ned Log is the word golden spelled backwards. Anything you would be willing to do for somebody else if they asked you, be willing to ask for that help yourself if you need it. You know, we need to go from the Lone Ranger culture to the support group culture. Many years ago, I was involved in the fight against the tobacco industry and their efforts to addict children. And I had a conversation with Dr. C. Everett Koop, great American hero. And I asked him what he thought was the most important development in all of healthcare in the 20th century. And he didn't talk about pediatric surgery, where he was a pioneer. He didn't talk about public health, where he was the key person in fighting public smoking and AIDS and things like that. No, he said he thought it was the support group. Why? Because in a support group, people are taking back responsibility for their own health, their own care, and not only that, they're reaching out and helping other people as a community. You know, it's having a culture where it feels like a support group. Well, Quint Studer talks about a replenishment culture. That is the way we deal with the exhaustion that makes cowards of us all. And I think a beautiful metaphor is the hug. What do you have to do if you want a hug, if you need a hug? You have to ask somebody else for a hug. Hugging yourself is really unrewarding and unhelpful. You have to be willing to say, you know, I need a hug. And in today's world, a lot of people need hugs. And we have to be willing to ask for it. There's been a lot written on lean management, kind of a left brain approach to management. And there's a lot of good stuff with it. At Values Coach, we talk about lean on me management. Having a support group sort of culture where at the end of the day, people go home, they're physically tired because they've been working hard. They're mentally drained because they've been thinking hard, but they're spiritually and emotionally uplifted because of the joy that they've had in working with other people, because of the spirit of fellowship, because they've been willing to ask for help when they need help, to practice the Ned Log rule, that golden rule in reverse. Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. There's no courage emotion. It's a decision to do what you're afraid to do in spite of the fear. Perseverance is making that decision every day, day after day. You fall down, you get back up. You fall down, you get back up. You hit the brick wall, you hit it again. Ben Horowitz is a very successful entrepreneur turned venture capitalist, and he's a good writer. And he wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And in that, you should read it. And in that book, he talked about conversations he's had with CEOs. And here's what he said. I always ask this question: what is the secret of your success? And he said the mediocre CEOs all talk about their brilliant strategies and their great leadership and the wonderful teams they have built. He said the great CEOs are remarkably consistent in saying the same thing. I didn't quit. I didn't quit. Randy Pausch. Here's a guy living the American dream. Randy Pausch, he's a professor at Carnegie Mellon Institute. He loves his job, loves his students. He's got a beautiful family, 3 little kids, diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and given 6 months to live. And literally as he was dying, he's thinking about lessons for living. And he wrote this beautiful little book, The Last Lecture, another book you should read. And in that book, he said, brick walls are not there to stop you. They are there to make you prove how much you want something. You know, the brick walls are not optional. You know, starting a business, writing a book, anything you want to do, you're going to run into roadblocks and obstacles. What is optional is letting them stop you. You know, the truth is, businesses don't fail. Owners quit. And for every Joe's Sporting Goods or whatever that's gone out of business because of the economic conditions or whatever, there's another Joe's Sporting Goods somewhere else where the owner stayed a little later, made a few more phone calls, went hat in hand to one more bank begging for a loan, came up with a new idea, did not quit, kept it going, and today the business is a success. And we've seen this during the pandemic, haven't we? We've seen restaurants go out of business. We've seen other restaurants do curbside delivery or come up with new menus, and they're doing fine. Businesses don't fail nearly so much as owners quit. And there's a quote that I absolutely love by Dan Kennedy, who's a marketing guru. And in one of his books, he wrote this. He said, "It's okay to be without resources, but it is inexcusable to be without resourcefulness." And then he repeats the same sentence 3 times, but with a different emphasis each time. He said, there is always something you can do. There is always something you can do. There is always something you can do. And that emphasis, there is always something you can do, is what will help you persevere your way through the challenges of trying to manage and grow a business. And I want to share with you a personal philosophy that I have. I call it be today, see tomorrow. And again, it's another way of shifting from right brain to left brain to deal with frightening situations. Here's what it means. Be today when the future looks bleak. You know, you feel like the economy's tanking, there are new competitors coming in, it feels like your business is tanking. Close the door on tomorrow and focus right now on what can I do right now today. On the other hand, when it's bill collectors banging on the door or a customer who's just canceled a big order, that's when you need to see tomorrow. You know, we're going through a tough time now, but here's the vision of where we're going to be. And don't let people lose that hope, that belief in that vision. You be today, focus on what you have to do right now today, but see tomorrow and keep the vision intact and alive. How do you know when to do which? Well, I don't know. That's sort of the art of leadership. And sometimes it may be a minute by minute shifting, but be today, see tomorrow. And one more thing while we're on the subject. The difference between courageous and crazy is often evident only in retrospect. Anybody who's ever started a business has had people, including well-intentioned people, maybe family members, say, "Are you crazy? You're quitting a stable job to do this and take all that risk?" And you know that 5 years later, when you're on the cover of the local business magazine as the success of the year, they're all saying, "I always knew you could do it." And of course, you smile and say thank you. And inside you're saying, "Nah, I don't remember it that way." Be today, see tomorrow. And remember to keep your courage up in the face of every challenge. You'll make it through. If you're a leader, there are many things that you need to do. There are classes you can take, books you can read, speeches you can go hear to tell you all the things that you need to do as a leader. And they're all worth going to and reading and listening to and doing. But there are 3 things that are essential to being a courageous leader and inspiring a courageous culture. And I want to share those with you. Number 1, show up where you're most needed and least expected. This is what J.R.R. Tolkien had Gandalf the Wizard do in his classic book, The Lord of the Rings. He would show up where he was most needed and least expected. That means, for example, if you're a hospital CEO, maybe you show up in the emergency department at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night on a busy Saturday, and you bring pizza. You show up at 6 in the morning when they're doing food services, getting ready for the day. You show up where they're least likely to expect you, but where they really most need you. Beyond that, show up in ways that are least expected and most needed. And I'll give you a great example. Some time ago, Cray supercomputer, back before you could carry a supercomputer in your pocket with a phone, their engineers were struggling with a really bad problem. And the company's founder, Seymour Cray, came in. He said, "What's going on here?" And they said, "Oh, we can't figure this out." He said, "All right, here's what we're going to do. You go home, get your shorts on, fill up coolers with beer, and we're going to go tubing." And they did. They went out and they went tubing down the river for the rest of the day. The next day they came in and they solved the problem. Now, the ordinary thing to do would be come in and say, okay, we're going to work a little harder here. Let me help out, put pizza. But to go tubing, what an extraordinary thing to do. Think of how you can show up and show up in ways that are most needed but least expected. Here's the second thing courageous leaders do. They recognize and they celebrate not only successes, they recognize and celebrate good faith failures. Some years ago, I was doing research on this for a book, and I heard about something that the company Medtronic does. I don't know if they still do it, but they did it back then. They have a venture capital arm of the company. They invest in high-risk startup businesses knowing that some of them, probably most of them, are going to fail, but some of them are going to be grand slam home runs. And they have an award called the Queasy Eagle, and it is literally a trophy of a sick eagle, and they give it to the most spectacular crash and burn investment of the year. The person who told me about this said, yeah, and I know somebody who got one. I said, well, tell me who it is. And I called that person up, and we had a conversation about it. He said, yep, it's sitting on my bookshelf. I'm very proud of that award. He also said, I hope I never get another one. But that is a great way of saying to people, we know that not everything's going to work out. We need you to be willing to take a chance, to take a risk, to take a leap, and we're going to be there for you when you do. And not only that, we're going to learn from the experience, because we're not just going to give you a trophy or a plaque. We're going to do an after-action report and figure out what didn't go the way we wanted it to, what could have gone better next time. And here's the third thing that courageous leaders do. All leaders should do this, but coming back to CPR, V and H, vision and hope. Keep the vision front and center. The first Star Wars movie, they're attacking the Death Star, and you hear the one pilot saying, stay on target, stay on target. And in times of uncertainty and in an age of anxiety, keeping that target, that vision, front and center, and the expectation, the hope, the belief that you're going to achieve it is so important. I live in Iowa. And like most states, we have vanity license plates. And I went down and I applied for one. They told me that I couldn't have it because it was too many letters. TBSSSNDQEM. But it's great leadership advice. TBSSSNDQEM. Think big, start small, start now, don't quit, expect miracles. You instill that philosophy in your team, and you will have a more courageous, more persevering, and more resilient organization. And you'll be more successful in the long term. Let's wrap up with a few thoughts on what it means to be a leader and on the distinction between management and leadership. Here's my take. Management is a job description. You have a title, hopefully a pay raise. You have a set of responsibilities, keeping the books, doing performance appraisals. Leadership is a life decision. You do not need a title to be a leader. On any Habitat for Humanity project, you have seen people step up to be leaders. They don't have a title. They don't even have a paycheck. They're volunteering their time, but they're leaders through force of their personality and their commitment. And in your organization, I'm sure you have people who, even though they don't have a management title, they do act as leaders. Management is something you do. It's a set of performance expectations, keeping the budget, selling products, whatever. Leadership is who you are. This is why it's often said there are only three kinds of leadership: example, example, and example. People will not listen to what you say nearly as much as they will watch what you do and witness who you are. Management expects compliance. Managers hold people accountable. They hold people's feet to the fire and crack the whip. Leaders seek commitment. They don't hold feet to the fire because they want people to walk across hot coals on their own. And both are important. Management and compliance is important. Accountability is important. But when you have a culture of ownership where people are committed and they're willing to walk across hot coals on their own, you don't hear words like compliance and accountability and I'm going to crack the whip and hold your feet to the fire nearly so much. 1976, James McGregor Burns wrote the book Leadership, won the Pulitzer Prize that year. And he defined two kinds of leadership, transactional and transformational. To me, transactional leadership is management. It's getting product out the door, getting the bills paid. Transformational leadership is about people. It's not about the business, it's about challenging and changing people, raising people to a higher level of values and personal expectations. And in today's VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, it's a military acronym. In today's VUCA world, you need to have leaders in every corner, not just in the corner office. And let me wrap up with two definitions of leadership. Joel Barker, who writes a lot about leadership and culture, says a leader is someone who takes you to a place you didn't know you wanted to go. And I love that definition because first it implies creating that vision. I didn't know he wanted to go there, but also inspiring people to make the journey, to make the effort, to get up when they fall down. I really like that definition. My definition is a little more personal. A leader is someone who helps you achieve goals that you didn't believe you could achieve by helping you become the person you didn't know you could be. You may have seen on the internet some version of this meme. Tabby Cat looks in the mirror and sees a lion looking back. And it raises a really good question. Who could you be? What goals would you achieve if you didn't let fear stop you from doing what you have to do to be that person, to achieve those goals? If you stop listening to negative self-talk telling you can't do that, you're not good enough, and instead you said, oh yeah, you shut up and watch me do it. If you did a better job of living your values and set a better example for the people that you lead and help them see and then become the lion in their mirror. And to me, that image of the tabby cat becoming the lion is a wonderful expression of what it means to have a culture of courage and resilience and perseverance. Good luck. Every good teacher ends the lesson with homework. So I'm going to give you some homework, things you can take home to build on what we've talked about today. First is an article that my colleague Dr. Bob Dent and I wrote for Nursing Management called Everyday Courage for Extraordinary Times. And it has a baker's dozen strategies for leading with courage. And even though it's in a nursing publication, these things apply to anybody, entrepreneur, organizational leader, nonprofit leader, you. Second, these are challenging times indeed. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I put together a book called Stay Strong for Us. I asked more than 100 healthcare leaders, motivators, authorities on human wellness and well-being, Quint Studer was one of them, to share a message of hope and courage and resilience and inspiration. And I put it together in this beautiful ebook. Frankly, I had hoped that it would be obsolete by now, but in our fourth surge here, it's more important than ever. And it's the kind of book you can open up to any page and find something that will inspire you and members of your team. It's a free ebook. Just go to Stay Strong for Us, all one word, no hyphens, staystrongforus.com. You can read it online as an ebook. You can download it. It's also available in hard copy on Amazon if that's what you want. Third, courage begins with yourself. Leadership begins with leading yourself. Pretending to be courageous even when you're not. And that requires you to win the one war that you must win, and that is the war with yourself. Overcoming your own worst self. And you know, I've been a student of military history for a long time. And I don't think military strategy applies very well in the world of business very often. Co-opetition is usually better than flat-out competition. But there is that one war you must win. And what I've done in this book, Winning the War with Yourself, is showed how to apply military strategies to conquering that enemy within. I call it YOWE, Y-O-W-E, your own worst enemy. It's a book that's on Amazon, but I've also attached, at no cost, a copy of the ebook for you to go through. You can read it either way. And fourth, earlier I talked about not just having goals and dreams, but making them memories of the future. And I put together a workbook. It's a guidebook on my 10A formula for creating a memory of the future. That's also homework. And again, it's free. It's a PDF for you. And finally, again, at the beginning of the pandemic, I put together a course called Everyday Courage for Extraordinary Times. It is 21 short video modules and 12 ebooks on various aspects of courage and perseverance and resilience, the things we've talked about in this course. And that is available through the Studer Community Institute. If you go to the SCI on-demand store, it's ondemand.studeri.org. ondemand.studeri.org, and look up Everyday Courage for Extraordinary Times, and that's available there. Let me wrap up. The next slide will have my contact information. Feel free to contact me by email. My cell phone number is there. I always look forward to hearing from people, and if I can ever help in any way, just give me a call. Thank you.